We wanted to bring you an update. This is pretty crazy from back all the way at the beginning of the George Floyd protests. And you'll remember there was like a conflagration in Minneapolis. There were riots that were violent that broke out. And then that, of course, spread almost across all kinds of major cities in the country. And at the time, a lot of people on social media looked at this one incident. It was one of the very first incidents of violence and defacing of property that sort of sparked the entire uprising in Minneapolis. It was this guy who looked very out of place, very unusual.
He looked strange at the time.
Caught people's attention, and you notice, and I'm going to show you the video, but you notice that the activists who were there are telling him to stop, and he's just casually continuing. And this ends up being one of the catalytic events that leads to what we saw unfold across the country. Let's just take a look at that moment.
I ain't got part of that shit. Dude. Oh, I zoomed in. I'll zoom out a little bit. Those cops will come for you if you're pulling that crap.
Looks like, yeah. So as you can see, the auto goes
Guy just came with a hammer and smashed the windows.
behind me. I'm gonna fight you right now. You wanna go? What's up?
So you see, they're trying to ask him who he is. He won't say.
Yeah, like, who are you? What are you doing?
This was spread. I mean, this video was really viral. And again, this was one of the first violent acts that really sparks everything that happens from there. So that's why it's such a key moment. There were rumors online about how it was one person. It ended up not being that person. Well, now the police in Minneapolis say that they have a suspect based on a tip they received that they believe to be Umbrella Man. They say that he is a member of the Hells Angels, an associate of the Aryan Cowboys, a known prison gang out of Minnesota and Kentucky. So basically a white supremacist who came in explicitly trying to spark riots and spark some sort of race war or something like that. And look, most of what was billed as like outside agitators. Remember right when this happened, the mayor came out and was like, oh, it was all people from outside of Minnesota. Turned out not to be the case. Most of the people overwhelmingly who were arrested were from the city. So most of the people who were participating in these acts were in fact locals. But this one guy, who police are now saying was in fact a white supremacist, was integral, unfortunately, in helping to spark this whole violent cycle.
It's pretty interesting because you're right, which is why I was deeply skeptical of this, is that the Minneapolis authorities were lying to everybody, being like, oh, it's all outside agitators. It's actually, outside white supremacist groups. None of that was true. It was, and fine, it's okay. It was a local movement, whatever. You're right, and so
and there was also an attempt from the right to be like, oh, these are all Antifa people who are flown in, which also was not true. And we have seen some other incidents, I believe in Las Vegas and actually over this weekend in Richmond, where you again had white supremacists who were involved in trying to spark violence. But this one is particularly noteworthy because it really was this sort of catalytic moment.
Yeah, that's right. And, it's going to be interesting to see if they actually find this person and if they get, a tip in terms of what happened here, because this was integral to what I think, spawned the entire violence. I don't want to absolve Minneapolis PD and the city of Minneapolis and these other people who didn't crack down on violence in the very first few days, and which is what I think was the conflagration of the entire country. I do absolutely blame them for being, for basically coddling and apologizing for much of the violence that we saw in the city. But if it turns out to have actually been spawned by a white supremacist, that's a very significant act.
Yeah.
It's very significant.
No, this isn't about absolving anyone for their actions or, the crackdowns from the police that also helped to escalate violence in certain cases and the brutality there, the individual acts of protesters that were, unconscionable in certain instances as well. But yeah, to see that this is potentially was all the initial spark came from white supremacists is, I think it's important. I think it's deeply disturbing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to need to see more reporting on it. It's certainly interesting.
Absolutely. We'll keep you updated. Tomorrow on Rising, Washington Post economics reporter Jeffrey Stein is back to give updates on stimulus negotiations.
That's right. Can't turn to anyone else. So please like, share, and subscribe to this video. It really does help others find us. And we will see you all tomorrow.